Hey everyone, Mindy Mandell here. Thank you for joining me. And what I want to talk about in this video is the first hypothesis in Plato's Parmenides. So in the past, when I first started this channel, I did go through, I think, 30 different dialogues, all the ones that are generally considered authentic, although there's some speculation about some of them. But I went through 30 different dialogues, and that included the Parmenides, and I did 2 videos on that dialogue. The first one called Theory of Forms and its Challenge, and that one gave the introduction where we met Socrates as a young man who at that time still had some difficulties dealing with the idea of things in themselves, or what I call absolute realities or forms or ideas in most universities. And he still had some questions, and he met Parmenides, who at that time was rather old, and he was a very revered philosopher. Parmenides challenged Socrates and was able to fairly quickly confuse him a bit and show Socrates where his limitations were. And then Parmenides said to Socrates that he had a lot of promise, but he needed to train himself in dialectic. And then that takes you into really the whole body of the dialogue. And I did one overview called the dialectic. You can see it here on the screen. And in this in this video, I gave an overview of the whole rest of the dialogue. And I think that one is still a good one to watch if you do want to get into this dialogue and understand it. Seeing the structure of it, I think, is very important. So I'm going to link that one above here. Now, YouTube only lets me link one, so the other one about the theory of forms, I'm going to link it at the end. But that one does give you an overview of the whole dialectic that Parmenides runs through. However, his dialectic is actually broken up into parts because he continually goes back and says, let's go back to the beginning and look at it again. And so in academia, we talk about there being different hypotheses, and there's some disagreement perhaps on how many hypotheses there are. Most people agree on there being 9. I look at it as 9, and I talk about that in that video on the dialectic and how they're organized. What I'm going to be focusing on here today, again, is just the first hypothesis. I want to go into depth into that one. But here's the quote that really starts it all off, and this is at 137b, and all of the translations that I'm using today are from Thomas Taylor. And Parmenides asks, "Are you willing, since it seems we must play a very serious game, that I should begin from myself in my own hypothesis, supposing concerning the one itself, whether the one is or whether it is not, and what ought to be the consequence?" And so he's focusing on the one itself, and he's going to sometimes look at if the one is and sometimes if the one is not. And that's how we get our multiple hypotheses. Now, for those of you interested in seeing self, how it's used in the Platonic canon, the idea of self is, of course, quite prominent in many Eastern systems, but we don't really see it in the Platonic system, at least not in the English translations. However, it is quite a bit in the Greek. And for those of you curious, you find that it's actually here 3 times in this one sentence. If you include words like myself, or my own also includes auto. And so, but of course, in English, we can't say myself hypothesis. So my own is the correct English, but in the Greek, it's self. Myself hypothesis also. And the main one here is the one itself. Whenever you see that reflexive itself, like the one itself, the good itself, beauty itself, justice itself, it's all probably auto. So enos auto, the one itself, or the one self, would be the literal translation. And so you can see the idea of self, and he's starting from his own self and looking at the one self. And that's another way to read it. When you read it that way, you do see it on another level, that he's focusing on the self and looking sometimes if the one is and sometimes if it's not. What does that tell us about the self? So that's another way to read it. But for this video, I'm going to stick to the Thomas Taylor translation. There's still quite a bit to see focusing on the one. And so with that introduction, let's jump into the first hypothesis. It really starts with this question. If one is it not true that the one will not be many? Well, in this first phrase here of one is this functioning here in the Greek really as sort of like a grammatical placeholder, the way we might say that it is sunny outside. We're not really focusing on the existence of anything. We're focusing on the sunny and outside. So is really just grammar. And that's the way it's functioning here, which is actually quite helpful because then we can read it this way. If one, what follows? That's really what we're asking. And here we're looking at the transcendent one, and that's why it is significant that he didn't focus on is as existence. It's more of just a grammatical placeholder because what he's really focusing on here is the one is transcendent. That's what we're going to see throughout the first hypothesis. The one that is immanent is going to be from the second hypothesis. But the first one is the truly transcendent one. Now, what he's going to be doing here is negating everything that we think about, every concept we have from our meditation on the one. And that really is the way to approach this. You have to approach it as a meditation. It's more than just discursive reading. It's not something you can read casually. It's not something to just kind of toss around in your head as theories. The way to really read this, the way to get the most out of it is to really read it as theurgy, to turn it inward and really purify yourself of any concept that you hold of the one. Now, he is going to be getting into the language of pure metaphysics. So this is different from theology. In theology, we're bringing in the language of a different culture or a different wisdom tradition or spiritual system. It does give it some texture, which makes it sometimes easier to get into, but it also means that that's something more we have to let go of. And so the language of pure metaphysics is in itself a kind of purification, but it can be hard to get into. So at least for some of you, actually, I think it's probably a breath of fresh air to read it this way. But for some of you coming from other traditions, it may be hard to transition into it. And so at least initially, you may want to keep in the back of your mind the idea that what he's really talking about here is the highest sense of God. Whether you're talking in different hypotheses, you may sometimes think of Christ or Shiva or some other symbol of God that is comfortable for you. But here we're talking about the highest sense of God. And if God, is it not true that God will not be his creation? That's really what this one is about. It's that transcendent one that is not immanent in the unfolding of reality, in the creation. So that's what we're looking at with the first hypothesis. Now, because he's introducing the idea of many, using the language again of pure metaphysics, he now goes into whole and part. So it is necessary, therefore, that there should neither be any part belonging to it, nor that it should be a whole. And since he's introduced part, we can now bring in beginning, middle, and end. He says, if therefore it has no part, it neither possesses beginning, middle, nor end, for such as these would be its parts. It's a question, by the way, because Parmenides is in a discussion with a very young man, the youngest of the group, a man named Aristoteles, who is very kind here to just, say yes, no, or I don't understand and not interject anything else and let Parmenides go. So for my purposes in this video, I just cut out Aristoteles' parts. So that's why there's the question mark there, because he's asking it to Aristoteles. Now, beginning, middle, and end, we can think of this as time. Like this video, it's going to be probably 35-40 minutes when I finish. You can think of it in terms of time as having a beginning, middle, and end. But also using the same video physically as a physical video, it is data. It has a beginning, middle, and end as well. And so you can think of beginning, middle, and end in time or in space. And what he's doing here is saying it doesn't have parts in any of these senses. There's also actually a higher sense at which you can understand beginning, middle, and end. The Greek word for beginning is arche, which is generally translated sometimes as beginning, but also can be source or principle, as in talking about the first principle. And end is telete, which is often translated as a completion or perfection. And, when we talk about the realms of reality, the reverting term, the third one in the triad, is the one that is often assigned the idea of completion or perfection, that reverting back and completing that whole realm of reality. And so this idea of an arche and the telete is like the whole unfolding of reality in the higher sense of reading these words. It's the whole unfolding of reality. And so even our idea, if you are thinking that the first hypothesis is the first principle, he's even challenging that right up front. He's challenging even that, because to be a principle means it's a principle of something. To be a source, it must be the source of something. There's still a relationship there. And he's challenging us to purify our thoughts beyond any relationship at all. So right off the bat, he's really throwing us for a loop here and really challenging us to turn this inward and ask ourselves, what does this do to our soul? To contemplate that the first hypothesis is even beyond whatever we thought we understood of the first principle. So when we talk of the first principle, of course, and some of you watching this may be new to Platonism, we talk about there being that condition that allows existence to be, and being the cause or condition for existence that technically doesn't exist. Yet being the cause or condition, we can't say it doesn't exist, and so there's nothing we can say about it. Parmenides now is saying, if you think that blows your mind, try to go even beyond that and even purify yourself of that. Well, then he goes on to say that the end and the beginning of something are its bounds, and the one therefore is infinite if it has neither beginning nor end. And I put limited and unlimited in parentheses because those are common translations, and those of you using a different translation may have these words instead. But when you talk about something having an end and a beginning, it has a boundary. Now, what we're going to see throughout the first hypothesis is that he's going to deny or negate all these different terms of the one. There is an exception, though, and that is the infinite. You'll notice here that he's not actually negating the infinite. He's saying that the one is infinite. When we get to the second hypothesis, we're going to find that he's going to affirm of the second hypothesis all the things that he denies here in the first. The infinite, though, is affirmed in both. However, you have to look at how it's different. How is the first hypothesis one infinite in a different way from the second hypothesis one? So that's another question to hold on to. Okay, well, if something has boundaries, if it were to have limits, then it could have figure. So here are a few different figures, whether it's a round figure or the limits are made by straight lines. It's still a limitation. And if the one does not have any bounds or limits, then it cannot have figure or shape. And so he says, and without figure, therefore, it neither participates of the round figure nor of the straight. And indeed, being such, it will be nowhere if it doesn't have shape or figure. It cannot be in place. It's nowhere. For it will neither be in another nor in itself. And so here, we're going to hold on to this one. He's going to come back to this idea of in another and in itself. He's going to use that again later. But we're seeing here it cannot be in place. Now, when you're talking about things being in a place, they can either stay in the same place and be at rest, or they can move and be in motion. But if the one is nowhere, then it can neither be at rest nor in motion. And so that's the next thing he wants to show. Whatever is moved is either locally moved or it suffers alteration. Alteration in the sense of growing older, or a flower growing, or a plant growing, or something made of metal might rust, for example. These are all forms of alteration. And these alone, he says, are the genera of motion. But if the one should be altered from itself, it is impossible that it should remain in any respect the one. So altered is the easiest one to dismiss, so that's the one he dismisses first. Now he's going to go on to why it cannot be moved locally. But indeed, if the one is moved locally, it will either be carried around in the same circle, or it will change one place for another. So an example of moving around in the same circle, here we see a circle that has some motion to it, moving locally from one place to another like this bouncing ball. But he's saying both forms of motion are impossible for the first hypothesis one. But ought not that which is carried around in a circle to stand firm in the middle, and to have the other parts of itself rolled about the middle? So it has to have parts. And can any method be devised by which it is possible that a nature which has neither middle nor parts can be circularly carried about the middle? So that idea is dismissed, and he says, if it changes its place, would it not become situated elsewhere and thus be moved? Has it not appeared to be impossible that the one should be in anything? So he's coming back to this idea of can't be in itself and it can't be in another. If anything is becoming to be in anything, is it not necessary that it should not yet be in it, since it is becoming to be, nor yet entirely out of it, since it has already become? So this is hard to demonstrate since it's all very abstract. I was thinking of trying to show like a rolling ball, but the ball is always in itself. So let's just take these two squares, the black one and the white one, and let's say the black square wants to move from being in itself to being in the white square, in the other, or in the rectangle, I should say. So at some point when it's moving, it's coming to be in another, which means that most of it, the largest part of it, is still in itself, but a small part of it is now in another. And then gradually, a small part of it is still in itself. Most of it, or the largest part of it, is in another until eventually it is completely in another. And so looking at it this way, that it's always becoming to be into something else, there has to be that transition. That means that it would have to have parts. So if therefore this can take place in any other thing, it must certainly happen to that which possesses parts. For one part of it will be in this thing, but another out of it. But that which has no parts cannot by any means be wholly within or without anything. Hence it will neither change its place by going anywhere, nor that it may become situated in anything, nor through alteration. So all the different ways we can think about motion have all been denied of the first hypothesis 1. And the one, therefore, is immovable according to every kind of motion. So it doesn't move, but does that mean it's at rest? Can the first hypothesis 1 be at rest? So that's the next thing he has to negate. He says, but we have likewise asserted that it is impossible for the one to be in anything. It can never, therefore, be in the same. Now, here Aristoteles is confused because he's probably never used same as a noun. And Parmenides explains it's because it would now be in that in which same is. Again, using it as a noun. But the one can neither be in itself nor in another. The one, therefore, is never the same. But as it is never the same, it can neither be at rest nor stand still. The one, therefore, as it appears, neither stands still nor is moved. And now that he has introduced same, he can also introduce different, and he's going to negate both of these. He says, nor will it be the same either with another or with itself, nor again different either from itself or from another. So there are actually 4 things here that he needs to deny of the first hypothesis 1. Same with itself, same with another, different from itself, different from another. Of the 4, he's going to start with the one that is the easiest to negate and then work his way towards the most difficult to negate. So he says, for if different from itself, it would be different from the one, and so would not be the one. And then the next easiest to dismiss is the idea of being the same with another. But if it should be the same with another, it would be that thing and would not be itself, so that neither could it thus be the one, but it would be something different from the one. Okay, so it can't be different from itself, and it can't be the same with another. And now he's going to show why it also cannot be different from another. This one is a little harder to see, so I'm going to read it first and then explain a little more. It will not be different from another while it is the one, For it does not belong to the one to be different from another, but to that alone which is different from another, and to no other. Okay, this one's a little confusing. What he's saying here, and I'm going to use the word nature loosely to say that it is not the nature of the first hypothesis, one, to be different from anything. Because to talk about different, A is different from B, there's a relationship. And we cannot have that kind of language or that kind of image in our minds when we're talking about the first hypothesis, one. He probably wanted to avoid the word nature, so he said it does not belong to the one to be different from another. The only thing that has such a nature, that belongs to being different from another, is that which is different from another, that has that kind of relationship or can have that relationship with something else, and to no other, not the first hypothesis, one. And then to make it even clearer, he brings back the idea that it cannot be different from itself, but now tying it into this argument, because it can't be different from anything. If it is not different from another, neither will it be different from itself. But if not different from itself, it will not be that which is different. It simply cannot be different, because that's a relationship. In being in no respect, that which is different, it will be different from nothing. Or to make it more of a negation, it will not be different from anything. It simply will not be different. Okay, and then the last one he still has to cover is the idea that it cannot be the same with itself. When anything becomes the same with anything, it does not on this account become one. And by the way, the reason I cut something out here is because that is the speaking part of Aristotle. That which becomes the same with many things must necessarily become many, and not one. But if the one and the same differ in no respect, whenever anything becomes same, it will always become the one, and whenever it becomes the one, it will be same. So if, therefore, the one should be same with itself, it would be to itself that which is not one, and so that which is one will not be one. So same is always referring to same to its object, same to something. And if it's same with a manyness, then we can't say that the one is many. So it doesn't work to say that the one is the same with itself. So what he's really doing here again is purifying us of any imagery we hold of time and space. I mean, we exist in time and space. And even though we understand on some discursive theoretical level that we need to contemplate the one, the first hypothesis, one, without any assumptions of time and space, it's easier said than done to do that. And so even if we think we're not bringing those assumptions into our contemplations, we very likely are. And so this is an exercise to pure ourselves even further of any assumptions we still hold about time and space. They're so deeply rooted in us that we hold them even without realizing we're holding them. We're applying them without even realizing we're applying them. And that's the change in our state of mind, the turning of the soul that we need to go through in order to truly have the vision of the first hypothesis, one. So that's what we're going through here. Okay, and then he wraps it all together, the four. Thus the one will neither be different nor the same, either with respect to itself or another. Now, what he's done with the same and different, he can now do with similar and dissimilar, because in a sense they are a step down from same and different, right? Similar is same with a little different mixed in, and dissimilar is different with a little same mixed in. But if neither same nor different can be applied to the one, then no combination of them can be either. So this is going to be a bit faster. He's going to say the same reasoning that we applied to same and different, we can also apply to similar or dissimilar. In many translations, another common translation is like or unlike. Okay, but neither will it be similar to anything nor dissimilar, either to itself or to another. Because the similar is that which in a certain respect suffers same. But it has appeared, that same is naturally separate from the one. But if the one should suffer anything except being the one which is, notice he slipped in the second hypothesis, one, because we're talking about experience, suffering, Thomas Taylor often used the word suffer in places of where in more modern English we would probably say experience. So if we're talking about an experience, that's the second hypothesis. So he slipped that in. If the one should suffer anything except being the one which is, it would become more than the one. But this is impossible. In no respect, therefore, can the one suffer to be the same, either with another or with itself. It cannot, therefore, be similar either to another or to itself. Okay, so again, following the same reasoning with same. And now he can do this also with different and dissimilar. Nor yet can the one suffer to be another, for thus it would suffer to be more than the one. But that which suffers to be different, either from itself or from another, will be dissimilar, either to itself or to another, if that which suffers same is similar. So the same reasoning applies. But the one as it appears, since it in no respect suffers different, can in no respect be dissimilar, either to itself or to another. And now again, tying the four together. The one, therefore, will neither be similar nor dissimilar, either to another or to itself. And if it cannot be same or different, then it cannot be the same measure or different measure, which means it cannot be equal or unequal. If it were equal, indeed, it would be of the same measures with that to which it is equal. Is it not, therefore, impossible that that which does not participate of same should either be of the same measures or admit anything in any respect the same? And if it cannot be the same measure, it also cannot be more or fewer. We're going to first tie it up, No, it will therefore neither be equal to itself nor to another if it does not consist of the same measures. Sorry, I forgot I had that quote there. And so now he goes on to say that it cannot be more or fewer measures. If it consists of more or fewer measures, it will be of as many parts as there are measures. And so again, it will no longer be the one, but as many as there are measures. So it can't be the same measure, it cannot be more or fewer. And then just to tie it all up, he also points out it cannot be one measure, because then again it would be equal. If it should be of one measure, it would become equal to that measure. But it has appeared that the one cannot be equal to anything. And now he's going to go on to say that it also cannot be of the same age, because again, the idea of equal. It cannot be the same age or a different age, because it cannot be equal or unequal. Okay, if it had in any respect the same age, either with itself or with another, it would participate of the equality and likeness of time, which we have nevertheless asserted the one does not participate. Now the part in yellow here I took from the translation of Harold Fowler, because I think in just this one place Thomas Taylor dropped the ball. He had something like, it would participate equally of the similar and time. However, time has not yet been negated of the first hypothesis one, so that didn't make sense. So I checked some other translations and I found that Thomas Taylor was alone with that translation, and other translations that I checked all had something like what Fowler has. And this makes more sense, that we have already negated the equal and the similar, and so then he also is going to negate the dissimilar and the unequal. If this also we have said that, this also we have said that it neither participates of dissimilar to nor inequality. And so now he can say that it cannot be younger, older, or the same age. The one, therefore, will neither be younger nor older, nor will it be of the same age, either with itself or with another. And now he can negate time of the first hypothesis one. Will it not, therefore, be impossible that the one should be at all in time, if it be such? He says, if then the one participates in no respect of any time, it neither ever was, nor has been, nor did become, nor is it now generated, nor is becoming to be, nor is, nor may become hereafter, nor will be generated, nor will be. So really just trying to clarify here that we cannot talk about past, present, or future in any sense when we're talking about the first hypothesis one. Now we've got just a few more steps. We're almost to the end here. There's quite a bit to hold on to here. but he's taken it completely out of time. And now he has to also take it completely out of existence, saying, is it possible, therefore, that anything can participate of essence except according to some one of these, past, present, or future? In no respect, therefore, does the one participate of essence. It cannot be, if it cannot be in time, he's saying. Hence it is not in such a manner as to be one, for thus it would be being, and participate of essence. But as it appears, the one neither is one nor is. So now he's even taking away one from the one. If it be proper to believe in reasoning of this kind. So it doesn't exist, it's not even one. So he's taken everything away. Notice he started with many and he ended with one. And he's taken it all away. So again, this is a meditation. It's one thing to just read it and follow the logic of it, but quite another to meditate on it, to really turn it inward and let it turn the soul and see what it does to you, see what state of mind surfaces, and also see what purifies out of you as you do this. So this is the meditation that even people I know who have been reading Plato much longer than me, 40, 50 years, this is the meditation, the contemplation that they still engage in. So here's his conclusion. But can anything either belong to or be affirmed of that which is not? Neither, therefore, does any name belong to it. So even the name one doesn't really fit it. That's really for us. That we name it that because we got to call it something. But that name doesn't really apply to it. It doesn't belong to it. Nor does any discourse or logos, nor any science or knowledge, nor sense or perception is another translation, nor opinion. He clarifies again that hence it can neither be named, nor spoken of, nor conceived by opinion, nor be known, nor perceived by any being. So this is the purification that we need to internalize, and really just sit with this idea. It ends with Parmenides asking young Aristoteles, is it possible, therefore, that these things can thus take place about the one? Well, young Aristoteles has not yet done this contemplation clearly because he doesn't understand it at all. He says, it does not appear to me that they can. And so from here, Parmenides starts to unfold the various ways we can talk about one through the realms of reality. He goes into the second hypothesis, the one that unfolds in the creation, in the realms of reality. Now, for those of you who, I hope that you all found this interesting, but maybe some of you will even try to do this contemplation, and I definitely do recommend it. This is a very important one for Platonists who really want to nurture that wiser state of mind, to really evolve your being, as opposed to just reading it as a curiosity. I mean, it is interesting, and those of you reading it just as a hobby, that's great, go for it, but there is so much more we can do with it. And so I do recommend sitting with this as a contemplation. It's a good idea to first study the text and try to just kind of remember the order. He started with many and then went on to part and whole and then beginning, middle, and end. And from there you can talk about it not having bounds, which means it can't have figure or shape. It can't move, or it can't be in any place, which means it can't move or be in motion, and so on. So you want to run through it all, try to hold it all so that you don't have to constantly be looking at a cheat sheet. So if you can close your eyes and turn inward and just try to contemplate it and try to feel it. What does that mean? To go beyond just the discursive insight and really purify yourself. Now, if you do this seriously, what you're going to find is that not only does it raise your state of mind, but it's also bringing up a lot of junk. That's what it means to purify. And we tend to want to avoid or, kind of push aside that mundane stuff. Oh, that's beneath me. I'm doing this, really serious, profound meditation. I don't want to be bothered with my restlessness or my insecurities or whatever. However, what we'll find is that both sides are part of knowing thyself, and understanding both is part of knowing thyself. And so dealing with false beliefs is very important. And so I'm going to link a video here about what to do with that garbage that when it comes up, and get it out of the way so that you can go back to the deeper, more profound contemplation. If you do have any questions or comments or any difficulties that you want to write to me about, there is an email address at the bottom of the description box. Also, I always enjoy reading your comments in the comments section, so please leave a comment for me and for other people watching the video. And as always, if you like what you saw, please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. And if you hit the bell, if the YouTube gods are smiling on you, they may give you a notification. They seem kind of fickle about it. I'm not really sure how to please the YouTube gods. But anyway, please subscribe. And when I put out new videos, you may even get a notification. So thank you very much.